I'm delighted to welcome Gerry Duffy back to my podcast this week. Gerry's an international keynote speaker and performance coach who works with global brands on topics including high performance, leadership, strategy, and people performance. Over the years, Gerry has shared his experience and wisdom with over 1,000 companies and organizations. His personal passion for sport has seen him complete many extreme sporting challenges, perhaps most famously running 32 marathons on 32 consecutive days. He's delivered over 2,000 presentations at conferences and workshops in Ireland and overseas, and he's authored 4 books. And in fact, it's his most recent book, Lessons for Leaders, that we're going to chat about today, a book I've just finished, and I have to say I thoroughly enjoyed it. So, Gerry, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you very much, James. I'm delighted to be here. And I'm wondering, are you giving me one more chance? Are you thinking to yourself, he couldn't be that bad on 2 episodes?
Well, I have to say you're one of the few people. I think you're only the second person, maybe the third, who's back for us for part two. It was back in November 23. So what, 2 years ago. And I think then we spoke primarily about public speaking and presentation skills,
We did.
a topic we're both passionate about. And I think this topic on leadership is equally one where I think we'll find some common ground. So you were kind enough. There it is. For those who are tuning in on YouTube, there's Gerry's book, co-written with PJ Cunningham, Lessons for Leaders, 28 insights to reflect on for senior leaders and CEOs. Give us a bit of the story behind the book, because how did it come about? Was it just something you built, or was there a spark of inspiration? What was the motivation behind it?
There was a spark. Well, maybe there's two sparks, if that's possible. One was I've always had an interest, but certainly for the last 15 or 18 years, in the topic of leadership. And the older I get, the more interested I am. But I was doing some work overseas a number of years ago, James. And what is now chapter 1 of the book happened one night in a hotel where I just noticed something in terms of how somebody was working. And it's just an inefficiency in what they were doing. And I did a quick calculation on a napkin of how much this inefficiency might be costing this business. And it was a significant 5-figure sum, even though it was a very rough kind of
Yes.
mathematical equation. And I reflected, I had a few flights that week, and I was sitting on a flight maybe the next day, and I thought, this would make a really good blog. And then I said, well, hang on now, what about if I turn it into a chapter of a book?
Mm.
And then within days, I started to see other things. So even before I got back to Ireland, I'd only one chapter written, which was what's now the first chapter of the book, but I had 3 or 4 other really good ideas that are now in the book itself as well.
Yes. Yeah. I love the structure of it. Because they were very digestible. It was like they were little parables almost. And I think for me as a reader, and I think for many readers too, it's like we like to be able to interpret something for ourselves as well, and we get that through stories. But what did you? If I go slightly more general to start with, and of course you're working with leaders every day of the week, how do you think leadership has changed since even you and I started doing what we're doing? Or what is their hunger for at the minute, for people who are in leadership positions?
I think if we go back to March, April 2020, and everybody can probably remember
Mm,
why I'm referencing that period. Over the next 6, 8, 12 weeks, there was like 20 years of development in technology, when there's an expression, must is a great master. And when we had to do something, innovation in technology and the migration to things like Zoom or Teams or WebEx or whatever was massive in a very short period of time. And it's only a personal opinion, but I think there's a similar, albeit maybe it's over a 5, 10 year period. I think there's a huge shift changing in terms of culture of work, and where and I think in many ways I think it's wonderful that it's almost people are more demanding of employers, and I mean that in a very respectful way. That, listen, tell me about your culture. And I
mm.
think culture is there's a whole wave of people. And I think this is gathering a bit of momentum that's not going to go anywhere. And people now are quite choosy where they work. And there's mass energy behind that, I think. And I think leaders, whether they want to or not, they're having to embrace that. I think they should anyway, but they're having to embrace that, because that's how you attract people. And people are, work-life balance is very important to the current generation. And that generation is only going to grow in numbers. So I think an awareness of how we treat people is probably the most important thing in a business. And that's going to deliver the profitability anyway, whereas the old psychology might have been quite different to that in many places.
Yeah, yeah. Well, certainly I can think back to, not that long ago, but I suppose it is 30 odd years ago when I started in the working world, and how dramatically different the working world is now. Whereas from the late 80s and early 90s, there probably wasn't a huge difference there as to, say, the 1950s and 60s. Um, Whereas if you jump forward now from the 90s to now, it's like Star Trek, some of the stuff. If we go back to the 28 lessons, which one was the one that either meant the most to you, or was the one that you most needed to learn yourself? There you go, Gerry. There's a question. I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah, no, quite happy to do that. And I have two kind of chapters come to mind, and I kind of give people a bit of a flavor. So there's one in it where I talk about, and even Bill Gates is
Yeah.
quoted as saying, one of the greatest skills, if you want to be world class, he talks about the ability to stay focused. And for me, the chapter is called Discipline, and it's the discipline of focus, the ability to stay focused on what you should focus on. And the people that achieve maybe the most are wonder-added skill sets, and they don't teach this in college or business or even in school. The ability to stay focused, it is a priceless skill set, it's a priceless resource. And maybe I'm so interested in so many things. And
Yes.
I'm always coming up with new ideas, and maybe that's the one that I have to be very accountable to, because I could be in danger of, I love this, but now I'm going to go over and spend time here. And so that's one that is a constant work in progress for me. And the one that resonated the most was, and you'll have read it, it's the final chapter.
Mm.
And the final chapter, without maybe going into it too much, is people might say, well, what's this got to do in a book on leadership? But the final chapter is about appreciation, and about appreciation for the fact that, are you aware as a leader that you're in your career right now? And the way the universe measures time, it doesn't actually last that long. And for me, like that I had that appreciation, I think, long before I even got the idea to write the book. But it's very deliberately the last chapter of the book. And obviously I go deep into, well, what
Yes.
exactly does that mean? But that's the one that I constantly remind myself of every single day, that this is on a journey, and am I really appreciating the journey of my career and of my life?
Yeah. Yeah, gosh, there's a lot there to unpack. If I go back to focus for a minute, it's a topic that's very front and center for me. I think a few weeks ago I did a podcast episode on it where I think I called focus is the new IQ. Now you get these things every so often, because maybe 20 years ago EQ, emotional intelligence, was the new IQ, but now it's focus, because we've never lived in a world that's more distracted. And we might think about things like multitasking, but now multitasking has fractured into things like continuous partial attention, whereas pure things around productivity is about focusing on something from beginning through to the end. So I'm with you on that one. And I'm also the sort of person who likes the new shiny button that's over there. It's like, being there, done that, what's new, what's cutting edge. But one of the things I always have to try to do is pace where the audience is at, and that's something that I found really interesting with your book, because so many of the lessons, from my perspective, I would say, well, that's common sense. Gerry is speaking common sense. Yes. Which makes it very relatable. But then, of course, I would equally say common sense is not common practice, because if it was, we'd be out of a job. But there was one lesson, I have it here in my notes, and I think it's a great one to share with readers. I think it was lesson 4. Pure common sense. Involve those who are already involved. Maybe speak about that one a little, Gerry, because I think it's a powerful one.
I think in business, and again, these are just my experiences. I'm very privileged, as you mentioned. I've seen inside an awful lot of companies. The education I've received myself that I get exposed to every single week. And I know you do an awful lot of work in the corporate space as well, James. So I'm sure you've got your own experiences as well. But it's realizing that, you know, a leader, like what's a leader's job is to bring the best out of people and to get us to where we want to get to. But people are central to that. And the story in chapter 4 centers around where leaders didn't in any way consult the people that would be most impacted by some decisions that they made in terms of work. It was in a work environment, they were changing the physical environment and where these particular demographic of people worked every day, but they were never consulted in any way, shape, or form about this big redesign that was going on. And I overheard this conversation in this work environment. And the person started saying, well, I don't think this makes any sense at all. And nobody even asked me my opinion. And they start to explain to somebody else, well, surely this doesn't make sense. And here's why. And as I heard them speak, I said, actually, that makes so much sense to me. And apart from the fact that maybe you might get better ideas because they're the people that are expected to work there all the time, it's showing an interest in people. It's empowering people. It's connecting people to the business. Your opinion matters. Your voice matters. And you know, the thing is, they might have a much better idea than you as the leader in the first place.
Yes.
And so the business might benefit. But a lot of leaders don't lead like this. They just, whether it's for ego or confidence or maybe a lack of awareness, the world is full of people telling people what to do. And I think that can have a certain value in certain circumstances, but involving wider people in this can bring us to much better destination.
Yeah. I always say leadership is about achieving with and through other people. But you're right. I don't know whether it's arrogance, whether it's ignorance, whether it's a lack of EQ. But I say it's sort of common sense. But then, interestingly, and this just pops into my mind, I was perhaps one of many people who thought the old command and control style of leadership was on its way out or was being used for when it was meant to be used in an emergency, when all other methods of leadership or styles of leadership have been exercised. But maybe it's the pendulum of how things change, or a step forward and a step back. We see a lot of leadership, particularly coming from America at the minute, where it is pure command and control. It is pure, you know, man coming in as a hero on a horse because only he can save the day. And I thought we were done with it. What's your view on that, Gerry? Or is that sort of the last hurrah, do you think?
There's a wonderful article that you might have come across written by Daniel Goleman in the year 2000, which I think is still a wonderful article. It's called Leadership That Gets Results.
Right.
And in it, he talks about the different styles of leadership. And he talks about the commanding style of leadership and the pace-setting style of leadership.
Yes.
And he said, but he talks about 6. And he said the best leaders have skills in at least 4 of these, and they use them situationally. And there's times when maybe a commanding is the right thing to do, like a building on fire. We need to get out of this building.
All shoulders to the wheel. Yes.
And in a former life, I would have been guilty myself of having a pace-setting style of leadership.
Yes. Pardon the pun, which you're running.
Yes, and maybe that's my natural energy. But if I'm leading a group of people, that can be. He said you've got to use pace-setting very sparingly because that can overwhelm people. And if our job is to get the best out of people, how we treat them, how we speak to them, how we lead them is critical to that. And so for me, like the older I get, maybe the more educated I get, I'd be using those particular ones. I'm not saying they don't have a value, but less and less and more about empowering people, that democratic style.
Yes.
And maybe a mix and have that self-awareness of when is the right style.
Yeah, the coaching style, the visionary style. I think one of the things I remember from that Daniel Goleman piece was the question he posed around, you know, what's sustainable, you know, and I think that pacing, the command and control one is not sustainable over the long term, because I think, although I won't say everyone, most people like to be involved and they like to have a sense of agency and empowerment. I used to say everyone does, Gerry, but one of my realizations in the last little while is some people still prefer to be told what to do. So they like to be on the receiving end of command and control. They like the degree of certainty, because if something doesn't work out, they don't have to take personal responsibility for it. That's a deep one.
And you know, I fully hear you for sure. I think that, as you said, some people might just want that. But I think the challenge with that is the leader will always have to be there every day
Yeah,
because
hand
people don't know
holding.
what to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's and it's not sustainable.
Yeah. And I think as well, if somebody mightn't have the confidence, well, how can you invest in that person if this is the amount of confidence they feel the need? Well, why not build them up to this level of confidence? And that can motivate somebody to maybe to take a little bit more responsibility.
Yeah.
So again, a huge thing that I see out there is a need and an appreciation and a desire for people to be developed.
Yeah.
And to invest in people rather than we just hire somebody and just go and do your job.
Yeah.
What about, like, and I know you're big into this, I'm big into this, and maybe it's because we work for ourselves, but I know myself, I'm always trying to improve, always. And it's that continuous mindset of continuous development. And two things happen as a result of that, I find, is I become more attractive to my clients because I'm always improving. If they're attracted to this quality and I keep improving it, well, then it tends to bring more business. But also my motivation rises as well because I'm innovating myself.
Yes.
There's a lot of wonderful things happen if we're willing to invest in people and develop people. And they add so much more value to the business, but it brings its own internal motivation as well. But not many leaders do this. And I think there's wonderful opportunity for leaders that do look at this path.
Yeah, that's very well said. I agree with that. There was many chapters in the book that really spoke to me, and another one that spoke to me had the great title. I think it was chapter 15, if I check my notes, Gerry. Unwanted Toast, because you have some great names on chapters that make you think. Unwanted Toast, that had me in there. And of course, in it you reference one of my favorite speakers, I have to say, someone who shoots from the hip. Now his name escapes me. Keith Cunningham.
Yeah.
Who I've seen speak, and it's funny. I have a thing here on my desk, a mouse mat, that I got from an event that he ran in Paris almost 20 years ago. It was a whole weekend with him, and reading your book reminded me of some of the gems of wisdom I got from him, and close to the top of the pile. And it was a very timely one for me, I have to say, in my own business, was unwanted toast. So you better explain what's going on there.
Well, it's interesting you should ask me about that because the book that you were kind enough to read, somebody else read it about 6 weeks ago, and they happened to be in my hometown about 3 weeks later, so 3 weeks ago, roughly. And they stayed in a hotel. They were actually doing a program with me the next day. And I arranged to go into the hotel area to meet them for breakfast before the workshop would start. And so I'm now in a hotel having breakfast with a guy who's read the book and would have read that chapter. And what lands on the table? Only 6 slices of unrequested toast. And you couldn't make this up because that's what the chapter is all about. It's about, I see this all the time in hotels. Most hotels, they will plonk 6 or 8 or sometimes more slices of bread in front of everybody. And most people have never asked for this. Well, I've never asked for 6 slices of white bread. And so I would imagine every single time that's going in the bin. And what I learned from, and we're both mutual fans of Keith Cunningham, I'd encourage viewers or listeners to check him out. I would go anywhere to hear that man speak. Just his business insights and the simplicity in which he puts it.
How he distills it.
Yeah, and you'll know this acronym. He's a famous acronym, which it's in 3 stages: FOWTW, and it's all about how to be successful in business, and that stands for find out what they want. Now, I never wanted toast. And that hotel is doing that 10, 12, 40 times every day times 350 days of the year. How much are they wasting there giving clients something they never wanted in the first place? He says, you got to listen to your customers, ask the customers, what do they want? And then GIGI, go and get it. And then GITT, give it to them.
Yes.
And a simple example, I tell the story in the book where I was at this conference. Cunningham was speaking at a 2-day conference. On day 2, there's a networking breakfast. I met a client who said to me over breakfast, we must get you back in again. And because Keith Cunningham had given that abbreviation the day before, I said, I'm going to ask this client what he wants. Whereas the old people said, I'll give him this. So I said to him, where do you think you might need help most at this time? And he spoke nonstop for 3 or 4 minutes. And I got a world of things that he felt he needed help with that I never would have heard if I hadn't asked the question.
Yeah. Yeah. So simple, but so somehow we get distracted. It's back to focus again when you think about it, Gerry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And listening, I guess, like really, as Stephen Covey said, seek first to understand.
Yeah, it's those although that even goes back to the Bible. I don't know. It's some of those phrases that last the test of time are all wrapped around kernels of truth. That's always the way. There was there was another section of the book, and again I'll go to my notes because it was a great counterpoint to a chat I had, gosh, about 18 months or so ago, with Jack Kavanagh, who I suspect you know as well. And Jack spoke about, he shared the phrase, small keys can open big doors. And Jack had a great story around that. You have a lesson in the book that's around small keys close big doors. And of course, it made perfect sense. I love the analogy of it. And again, you might expand on that one because I think it's one that many people will resonate with.
Yeah, so I'm going to tell a different story to the one in the book, but it's the same
Right?
principle. And it's where small things have a big impact, sometimes very positively. Like you will know, for example, in when you do your presentation skills workshops, the power of pause.
Yeah.
It's a small key, but can open a big door in terms of impact in a very positive way. Similarly, small keys or small things can close big doors as well. I was I was working with a client a number of months ago, and we had to change a date with the hotel at the last minute. And sorry, not at the last minute, but 2 or 3 weeks' notice. And
Mm,
the hotel was quite inflexible, but it did it. But there was just it didn't. It wasn't a good conversation, and said, you can't be changing this. Now there was a number of weeks lead in, but anyway, on the morning of the actual event, it was a 2 day thing, and we were going to be staying in a hotel, a number of us, and somebody had something very significant happen. Somebody so they couldn't attend the 2 day event. And we'd booked a series of rooms in this hotel. So at
yeah.
8 o'clock in the morning, we knew that night this person couldn't attend. So we went down to reception to cancel the room. And there was utter inflexibility. You were going to be charged full price for this. Now, to a certain degree, I have to respect that. But this client was an extremely good client of this hotel. They go there on a very regular basis.
Yes.
And the client who I was working with is now going to pay for a hotel room that they're not using, even though they're booking lots more rooms the same night. We're
Yes.
there for 2 days, and we're going to be there again in 3 months' time. It was put out by this to the point that they're no longer going to go to that hotel.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a small thing, but it's now after closing a big door.
Yeah. That's so short-sighted when you think about it. But it reminds me, and again, you don't know the thinking or the logic behind it, but I'm sometimes reminded, and I know this from my own experience of being in hotels as well. The ones who have had customer service training, and the ones who are giving it to the letter of the law. It's like, I need to say this when the guest comes up or sits down for breakfast or whatever it is, because that's what I've been instructed to do on page 72. It's a bit like nowadays, you can see the social media posts that are written by AI. Like, we're not silly people, we can figure it out. It's like, it's the difference between the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. And that's what that story reminds me of. It's like maybe someone is following the letter of the guidelines, but they're not seeing the bigger spirit of it.
As you share that, there's a great quote. I don't know who I can attribute this because I don't know, but it's about doing things right or doing the
Yeah,
right thing.
yeah. That's exactly it in a nutshell. Yeah, doing things right or doing the right thing. And it requires a little bit of, how would I say it, understanding, empathy, seeing the bigger picture, all of those qualities. But maybe the person behind the desk or the decision maker there was not empowered to make those decisions.
Absolutely, yeah.
And therefore, there's consequences. That short sightedness, though, certainly is something that grates with me when I experience it. And I know the example in the book you had mentioned, again, it was in a hotel. I think people must think we live in hotels, Gerry, was where Wi-Fi was down and the ripple effects of that. It reminded me, there was one story, and it's going back a while, with the hardware firm, and this hardware manager in the firm told it to me. in a place where he had worked before, where this older woman came in looking for bits of paint. And she said she had gone to another hardware store and they hadn't dealt with her very well, and they had, tried to get rid of her quickly rather than spending some time with her. And he said he spent some time with her and showed her the different paint. And he said he might have thought she was a little bit of a fusspot, but you deal with the customers. And as it came to pass, then her son came in the following day, who was a building supplier, and bought a huge amount of stock from them on the mother's recommendation. So you just never know. You just never know. Changing tack slightly. There was a segment in the book where you speak about the importance of setting yourself up for an ideal day or an ideal week, which is a concept again that I really adhered to, because I know I sort of have to fuel myself before I have energy to give anyone else. The old cliche of putting our own oxygen masks on. What does that look like for you, Gerry? Because I know you spoke earlier about high performance. You give so much. There has to be a certain level of energy to what you do. How do you set yourself up for an ideal day or an ideal week? What's your routine?
So, the chapter you're referring to, I call this leadership of self.
Mm.
For you to show up and perform at your optimum best, what does an ideal week look like in terms of behaviors and activities? Because if I was doing this live with an audience, I'd say, who here brushed their teeth 6 months ago on a Tuesday night 6 months ago? Everybody did. And I said, well, if you hadn't brushed your teeth since, what would be the consequences now? When people say, well, socially, I'd be very challenged. People might want to sit around me. I'd have significant gum disease. There could be a financial implication, could affect my relationships, could affect my mood, etc., etc. And where I'm going with that is the simple things we do every day have an impact. Our behavior really, really, really matters. And so what I've identified is just this concept of identifying, well, what would you be doing in your ideal week for you to perform at your best? And in the book, we kind of dig into outside of work and inside of work. But to specifically answer your question, for me, some things that are key to success, if I want to perform at my best, the time I get up in the morning, Monday to Friday, is really important to me. Now, it's just a personal value. For somebody else, it mightn't be. But for me, getting up at a very particular time, apart from the fact that I feel I can get a lot done early when I'm not distracted by the world, I just value being up really early in the morning. So for me, that's 5 a.m. Monday to Friday. For some people, that's late. For some people, it's super early. But for me, it's very, very, very important. And so I try and do that 5 days a week. So for that to happen, I got to go to bed. I have an idea, well, what's the ideal time to go to bed? So for me, that's 9:30. But there's other things, the quality of food I eat.
Yes.
Even, and you're going to laugh at this one, but this is important to me, how clean my car is on a Sunday, because cluttered car, cluttered mind. So these are, and I have another 6 or 8 things, maybe more that I do, but all these things help me perform at my best. Even downtime, switching off at night, turning off the phone, etc., etc. There's things there I definitely need to improve, but I'm very aware of the things, so at least then I can start to set goals around them.
Yeah, and do you find, because I know I have routines and rituals, and I think it might have been in my membership community, I shared it recently, because over the last 4 months, I felt I had it nailed. I said, this is working for me. Tied in with some stuff I was doing through the gym from a well-being perspective. I'd moved to a low glycemic diet. I certainly wasn't eating toast. There was no bread in there. And like for years, I knew I have a wheat intolerance. It's like, James, just pay attention and listen to yourself. And feeling great, energized or whatever. But then it's like I went out of balance. It's like that was working for me short term on a weekly basis, but over a 4-month, 5-month period, then I found myself going out of balance. And of course, I picked up a cold. You can probably still hear it in my voice. And I needed a week, and I'm just coming out of a week of not really doing too much, because I felt I had to regain equilibrium to go back into the routine that I know serves me best. But I suppose I heard myself saying to Brian, I'm not a robot. It's not like just program you in and this is it forever. And of course, if it's constantly like this is also flatlining. There's no fluidity to it. So I think what I've learned in recent times with that balance is a living thing, because we're living creatures. So you're part of the 5 a.m. club. I have to say, I'm an early morning person too. I wouldn't be 5 a.m. But I do know I'm at my best in the morning, and it sets me up for the day. We better, before we move towards close, Gerry, I'll put up the book again. Best place to get it, I presume, through your website, gerryduffyacademy.com.
Yeah, at the top of my LinkedIn profile, if people are interested on the
Yes.
website, that's the easiest place.
And send you a note. Yeah. And the LinkedIn is your main social media platform, I think, isn't it?
It's my only social
Your
media.
only one. Well, there's focus for you.
Yeah, it's
There's focus. Yes. As we move towards close, maybe two more questions to reflect upon. I know my answer to this one for myself, but I'll ask it for you. Is there a lesson that keeps reappearing for you, Gerry, because you haven't quite learned it yet?
Is there a lesson that keeps repeating itself for me?
Or one that keeps reteaching itself to you?
Out of the book?
Anywhere or in life?
I think I remember years ago, and there is a chapter in the book that kind of touches on this. And I remember Patrick Lencioni, the great kind of business leadership author, speaking about a great quality of a leader is awareness.
Yes.
And the skill, I think the skill or the power of having self-awareness.
Yes.
And I used to have a severe lack of self-awareness up to maybe 10, 12 years ago. And I did some work on myself.
Yes.
And it was hugely enlightening to me. It was hard to take at the time.
For sure.
It was hugely enlightening and empowering. And so it's almost, I was so lacking in it. I've become the opposite now because I was so bad at it. It was such a startling realization for me to self-awareness. How am I coming across to other people? What's kind of going on here? So for me, I've become, I see it every day now, like even that awareness of chapter 1 of the book, I was able to see something, but even how am I feeling, self-awareness, how am I feeling? How am I coming across? Am I working too hard? Am I working too less? Am I being a person? Am I leaving a room better than I found it?
Yes.
And just that introspection, I guess, is one that appears almost every day.
Yeah. And again, there's no end point to that. Certainly not with self-awareness. It's like the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. We're constant mysteries to ourselves. I would describe myself as someone who has always been fairly self-aware, but my God, it's like there can be no end to it. Part of my challenge is actually stepping back from the introspection a little, because I can get so caught up in it that as I often say to groups or to people I work with, too much of anything is not so good, including introspection, including overthinking, let's say. Over anything is not so good. Over planning is not so good. But linking into what you have said, it takes courage to do that. It takes courage to do it. And how would I say it? Perhaps the leaders who struggle the most are the ones who don't have the courage to look within. Yeah. And they would sooner die than change.
Yeah. And maybe just add to that, it might also be just they don't have the self-awareness to look within, possibly.
No,
just that shortcoming in self-awareness.
Yeah, it's the blind spot. It's the blind spot. We all have them. We all have them for sure. And I suppose it goes back to Maya Angelou piece. People are doing their best with what they have. Last question, Gerry. This sort of teases, will there be a sequel to it, as in more lessons for leaders? But it reminds me of the Nancy Kline, and actually you quote Nancy Kline in the book, and I'm a great fan of hers too. Was it time to think and more time to think? More lessons for leaders. probably since you wrote the book, because I'm quite sure there's a time lag in it. But if there was a 29th lesson, what would it be? What would be the cutting edge, hot off the cuff? Here's another insight for you.
Well, it's new, but it's not new at all. And you're right. Even since the book was published only a few months ago, at least once a week, I'm getting a new idea for a new chapter. So I've got about 11 or 12.
There
I
you
haven't
go.
written any of them yet. None of them are written yet at all. But you know, listen, you've written many books, so I know you know where I'm coming from. But for me, this is something that's been around for decades. But and I'm going to give an example. In fact, even before I tell you what it is, if I could have maybe 2 minutes on this one.
Sure.
Whoever is watching this or listening to this, I'd love you to take the number of people that work in your place of employment. So say it's 100 people, that number is 100. And multiply it by the average of the number of hours that people work. So say that's 35 hours. So you multiply 100 by 35 and multiply that by, say, 46. And say people work kind of 46 weeks a year. Maybe they work more. And that will come up with a number. And that's the number of hours that everybody in your company is giving every year. So you've probably just calculated a really, 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 really big number in the thousands, maybe the hundreds of thousands, maybe in the millions. And in my experience, and I definitely, one of the chapters I will go into this deep, is everybody wants to be better with time management, but very few people actually ever bring that any further. And I would just love it. And I'm involved in this. I know you're involved in this as well. But when you really sit down with people and really get to analyze where they're spending their time, like if everybody in a company, for a leader listening to this, was to improve their time effectiveness by 5% of all those people, what would be the impact? But when do we ever spend time really looking at people, where people are spending their time? Because whenever I do it, it's amazing maybe the inefficiencies or the efficiencies people start to see. And so I will definitely write a chapter on that. And then I will suggest to people, it's all about identifying what's most important, because if everything you do is important, nothing is important.
Yes.
So it's even identifying your core job responsibilities. What do they really need to be? And then ranking them in order of importance. And I think any leader that does that will see things that where there's opportunities for growth. You times that all your department, all the company. It's such a thing, but it doesn't happen that often. And yet it's a free resource that takes no financial investment, and the dividend of it would be huge.
Yeah. Makes complete sense. And as ever, it's what's the phrase? The ironic phrase with time management is it requires time to work on it. But again, going back to, I think time management is still the phrase that is maybe in the vernacular. But it does loop back to what you were saying earlier about focus. It's really focus management, or discipline. Another word that you had mentioned earlier comes into it. What's your definition of discipline, Gerry? How would you describe it? Because you do strike me as someone who is obviously disciplined in your approach for a 5 a.m. get up every morning. You're disciplined in your own high performance and your own investment in your own learning and growth. Is that, maybe it's not, is that discipline, or is that just who you are and the expression of who you are?
Maybe it's who I've become, because I can see plenty of evidence in my life where I was not disciplined, like in different ways. And maybe if I become a disciplined person, it's through thousands and thousands of things over many, many, many years. You'll know Jim Rohn well, the great motivational speaker. He said, success is a few simple disciplines practiced every day.
Yeah. It's back to might be common sense, but it's not common practice. It has to be practiced every day. And that ties in with what you were saying about the new chapter in the next book, where we're only talking about little adjustments. Like, we're only talking about a 5% shift along here from reactivity to proactivity, let's say. But then the ripple effects of that, and that's the same in our own lives as well. What's the little changes? But that if I consistently adhered to them, there's a new direction.
And I think, to kind of close out even on the question you asked me, well, what's discipline to me? And again, I learned this from somebody else, that, it's being committed to that. But I've learned a wonderful definition of commitment. Commitment is doing what you said you would do long after the mood that you said it in has left you.
Hold on. I need to write that one down. Commitment is doing what you said you would do long after the mood has left you.
Yeah.
I'm trying that one on.
It's a bit like somebody joins the
Yes.
gym in January and
Yes.
they're very committed in January because we have that New Year enthusiasm. But why the
Yes.
gym gets quieter the longer the year goes on, because at some time people still have the goal, but they lose the commitment to it because they're not in the mood that they were in January. So
Yeah.
it's doing it when you're not in the mood. That's
Yeah.
commitment.
Yeah. Yeah. And then my brain is running with that one. It's like, how, even though I'm not in the mood, how can I get back into that mood? I don't know, refocusing. It reminds me of discipline. I can't remember the origin of this quote, but it was discipline. It's similar to it. Discipline is doing what you should do, even though you don't want to do it. So it's similar, as
Yeah.
in maybe I've committed to something and now it's like, no.
And a great thing there, I think, and again, I've learned all this in the last 20 odd years. I wouldn't have known this 20, 25
Yeah,
years ago. But I think a great thing to reconnect to when we're not in the mood is, well, why did I want this goal in the first
in the
place?
first place. Yes.
And the why
Yes.
is usually that
Yes.
will carry you through those times when you're not as motivated or as committed, to reconnect and maybe even emotionally with the why behind it. And I
Yes.
found that's a superpower to keep you on track.
That is it, the why. Yeah, the why, the motive and motivation. Yeah. Yeah. What a lovely way to close, Gerry. Let me bring up the book again for those of you who are watching us on YouTube. There's the great cover. Lessons for Leaders, 28 Insights to Reflect on for Senior Leaders and CEOs. I say very readable, very accessible, full of your voice, Gerry. I love the little anecdotes in it and the experiences.
Thank you.
I certainly took plenty from it. And as you say, best accessed through your website where people can find out more about you, gerryduffyacademy.com, and on LinkedIn, as you would say. You can get it there too. So, Gerry, thank you. Thank you for joining me again this week. It was a pleasure. The time has zipped by. And thank you for coming on and for speaking about your book, Lessons for Leaders.
I'm very grateful. Thank you indeed, James.